Are you familiar with the five miracles of money? These are closely guarded secrets by the most wealthiest people and by the most wealthiest financial institutions in the world. But they are ready and available for everyday folks, business owners, real estate investors, property owners, just like you and I. Listen, I am so excited to have this conversation as we talk about the five miracles of money. So let's get into it. So what are the five miracles of money? Okay, before I get into each of them, I want to talk about the second miracle of money, which is how do you build cash reserve? So what role does cash reserve play in light of the five miracles of money? Well, it is the second step in the process of creating a 10x effect on your finances or your overall financial position. So let's take a look at it this way. So imagine waking up tomorrow, right? And there's an unexpected financial emergency that has fallen to your lap. Maybe it is an unexpected job loss. We're hearing a lot about that in recent days. Maybe a market downturn or medical expense. And you would like to be financially prepared, but would you find yourself in a situation where you're scrambling to find cash? Most people struggle in this situation. Here's the reason why. Because they have limited liquid cash reserves. This is probably, and I was having a debate with a tax strategist about this conversation. Is it better to be in a situation where you have a lack of credit or a lack of cash reserves? And I was saying to him that, well, you can get credit and you can use other people's money. However, when you have your own money, you can create the five miracles of money from your own money. And instead of you paying profits to someone else, you can pay those profits to yourself. So we don't want to find ourselves in a situation where we have a need for cash reserves and we just don't have it. I'm having a client now who needs cash reserves, right? They got a 401k, but you know the problems with that. They can access the money, but they're going to have to still pay taxes and penalties. The problem with this is that not only do they have to ask for permission to get the money, the provider has to agree with it, but they're going to be taxed on the money in an emergency crisis. Now, listen, everyone's definition of the crisis is not the same, but it doesn't matter. When you need to get your hands on cash reserves, ladies and gentlemen, you tell me, wouldn't you rather have your own money rather than going through all kinds of extra steps and rules and regulations to get someone else's money? Or wouldn't it be a much better situation to be in where your money is liquid and accessible and is not taxed? Not only is it not taxed, but it continues to grow despite the fact that I am using that money. So what I want to do here is take a moment and walk through a couple of different scenarios as we get into the miracle of cash reserves to talk about the power of cash reserves and what steps do we take to increase our cash reserves and to better position us so when life unexpected scenarios come up, not only are we prepared, but we are positioned to create the five miracles of money from that particular situation. So let's get into it. So why do traditional savings accounts keep you broke? And what do the wealthy do instead? So I got a question from one of the people who were in my class, and they were talking about what is the difference between money markets, savings accounts, and CDs? And without making this a class into those different financial instruments, the basic point that I was trying to make to them is that all three of those are pretty much cash position assets. In other words, they have great liquidity, and in exchange for that, they also have low interest rates. Typically, you give up rate of return in exchange for liquidity, but that does not have to be the case. But unfortunately, when you're dealing with those three types of instruments, you're going to have liquidity, you're going to have access to cash, but you give up a higher rate of return or the potential for a higher rate of return. So they were asking me, well, should I use this for my retirement money? I said, always remember this rule. The purpose of the money dictates where it should go. The purpose of the money dictates where it should go. So the problem with putting retirement dollars or long-term dollars into those types of instruments is that that low interest is going to work against you in a variety of ways. One of the ways it's going to work against you is that the cost of living is growing faster than the interest that is being earned on those instruments. Well, you can get to it, it's liquid, but over time, you actually are creating a negative effect or negative rate of return because inflation, real dollars, the expense of the quality of life is going up, but the money that the instruments that you have your money in are not keeping up with that growth. So you want to be careful with using those types of instruments. Even though it is cash reserves and the money is liquid, you're going to run into inflationary risk. So you want to be careful with those types of situations. Next question. So how do you create a financial safety net to protect against recessions, job loss, and emergencies? Let's take our time here. One of the things that we talk about is we give real life scenarios where a client has shared us with, or potential client or student in our classes has shared a concern, and we talk about some of the options that they may have considered before they ended up in that situation, and then what do they do now? So, for example, we have Lisa, who's a small business owner, right? Well, she faced an unexpected 6-month revenue drop due to an economic downturn. Because she didn't have cash reserves, she was forced to max out her credit cards and take out high interest loans. We see this as a common problem because we're using credit cards as a fallback for emergencies when she should have been better positioned with cash reserves to use her own money. Why should she had been in a better position to use her own money? Because when we know how to use our own money, we're going to create what? The 5 miracles of money. When we talk about the cash reserve piece empowers, or would have empowered her had she had cash reserves in a tax-free instrument that gave her a great rate of return without market losses, and she had liquidity. And when she went to access the funds, not only was the money there for her, but it continued to grow despite the fact she was using the money. This is a powerful example of when we are using the right cash reserve instruments to not only provide liquidity, but growth, and we don't compromise the growth of that money despite using those cash reserves. Okay, let's go to the next one. So people are asking me, okay, all right, Jeff, so then where should I put the money? Remember, let's go back to number one. The purpose of the money dictates where it should go. Again, the purpose of the money dictates where it should go. Short-term instruments are great for liquidity. So if I'm going to be using this money within the next 6 months, year, 2 years, I'm going to use a money market. I want to use a CD or your regular savings. But again, here's the problem that you're going to run, particularly you may run into, depending on the size of that account, you may run into tax penalties. Okay, especially if you're talking about a CD. So you got to be careful. And then we're still talking about the issue of inflation. So let's talk about this. So we want to reposition cash reserves into index universal life types of instruments when it has been properly designed for that purpose. We want to create a scenario where we're getting potentially 6 to 10% tax-free returns. We want to keep that money so that it's accessible anytime without penalties. And we want to make sure that we'll shield it for reserves from creditors and lawsuits. Now, I'm not an attorney here, not here to give you legal advice, but it's good if you can have your money in instruments that protect you from creditors and from lawsuits. So let's talk about the key takeaway. plus growth. The key takeaway here, right, is we don't want to have plus put growth, our money into something, right, where we don't want to have, but we give up growth into something, or we have liquidity and then we get a penalty, or we have liquidity and we don't have the advantage of tax-free. We want to have liquidity plus growth. When you put both of those together, you can create what I call the wealth formula. So if your money isn't earning and accessible, it's losing economic power, because the purpose of your money, particularly when we're talking about cash reserves, you want your cash reserves to be in position to protect you from current and future financial problems. You want to be positioned for current and future financial opportunities when the money is in the right cash reserves. All right, so let's go to my next question here. So how do banks use cash reserves to multiply wealth? And how can you do the same? So let's talk about the problem. Banks make billions of dollars using what? Depositors' money, me and you, to lend out at much higher rates than what they pay out. So here's the question. Is the interest on your credit card higher than the interest on your savings? This is a very important question, because if the interest on your credit card is higher than the interest on your savings, you are in a negative position because you're paying out more money than what you're making. And that leads to having to work harder. So we don't want to park our money in accounts that are earning close to zero or negative number, because the money that we are paying out is higher than the interest that we are earning on our cash reserves. So let's talk about one of the potential solutions here. And this doesn't fit everyone, but let's just take a look at this. So if you have what I call a savvy real estate investor, David, right? So he copied the banking model. We call it the banker's mindset. So he's going to use a HELOC blended with an index universal life policy. Now, this is not for everyone, and you should not try to attempt this without having an expert or a subject matter expert who understands this and the nuances of putting something like this together. But his purpose was to leverage his cash reserves as collateral for his real estate so that he could get more money from the bank. In the process of that, because he knew how to structure the HELOC with the IUL, he was able to double his property equity value regardless of market conditions. This is a very, very powerful strategy. This is another super secrets. But again, because he's copying the banking model, he's not thinking from a borrower's perspective. He earned more interest on his own money than banks would pay him. This is a very critical point to emphasize here, because I know that we hear that we want to use other people's money. I don't teach that. I don't believe in that. We want to use our own money and then generate or create or utilize and leverage the 5 miracles of money to maximize our opportunities, where we're literally able to create, to some degree, our own rate of return. So instead of letting the banks profit from your money, adopt the banker's mindset by structuring reserves to grow with leverage. It is knowing how to put all of these pieces together to create an opportunity so that I can make my money grow for me faster than other traditional strategies. Let's go to the last question here. So here's a case study. I want to kind of go a little slower here. So how does a real estate investor double cash reserves and property equity in just 3 years? Listen to this. Meet this investor. His name is James, okay? He's a real estate investor and he's struggling with low liquidity and high interest debt. Any real estate investors out here in the same situation? Are you struggling with low liquidity and high interest debt? I hear that a lot. He was trapped in traditional loans, relying on tenants for cash flow. This is a high-risk situation. So here was a strategy that I walked him through. And again, this is not a detailed case design review. We're just kind of giving a bird's eye a review of how this worked. So one of the things we wanted to do was to redirect his cash flow into an index universal life policy. Now, this was a fit for him because of his situation. This doesn't fit everyone. Then we used the policy loans we used policy loans to acquire more properties without using his own cash. Again, we are skipping some steps. We're not getting into the woods in this. We're just showing you a bird's eye view. Over a 3-year period, his cash reserves doubled and his property equity increased by 110%, all without tenants. Ladies and gentlemen, learning how to leverage cash reserves, knowing how to put different pieces together for your benefit can have a tremendous positive impact on your overall retirement profile while becoming less and less dependent upon tenants. So the key takeaway here is that real estate investing isn't just about properties. It's about structuring money for maximum cash reserve accumulation. Listen, if learning more about the 5 miracles of money, and the emphasis here is cash reserve, as cash reserve is the second piece of the 5 miracles of money. If you want to learn more about this, why don't you register for my class? If you have questions about anything that has been said here today, take a moment, put it into the chat. Let's talk about it. Let's see if I may be able to answer a question. Now, I may not be able to go too deep, okay, but if it's something basic, I can pretty much answer that. Or we can take your question and put it into our next class and use it as a case design. Thank you for taking a moment to listen to what we're talking about here, the 5 miracles of money, with an emphasis on cash, accumulating cash reserves, and better protecting ourselves so when emergency comes, we're not dependent upon debt to get us out of trouble. We can use our own money, and then by using our own money, position ourselves to use the 5 miracles of money to grow that money while we are using it to solve a problem or while we're using it for reinvestment, even at the same time. So again, take a moment, register for our next class. Let me get your thoughts. Tell me, what are you learning about our conversation here, and would you like to hear more? I want to thank you for this opportunity to share with you. I've had fun, and I look forward to seeing you guys soon. Take care.